Welcome to US Eagle Claw YouTube channel. The Ukraine-Russia war, which has caused very serious effects on an international scale, continues to put pressure on all countries of the world. In this war, which has been going on for about 10 months on the Eastern European flank, the recent domination of the Ukrainian army against the Russian troops enabled the liberation of many homeland lands. Zelensky's brave soldiers continued to concentrate especially in the southern region of Ukraine, while Russian forces were not very effective in this region due to the lack of ammunition and soldiers. The historical defeat of Kherson, one of the greatest victories of the Ukrainian army since the beginning of the war, inflicted great losses on the Russian troops. Never before has the Moscow administration been so humiliated, both in the military and in the political and diplomatic arenas. The leadership position of Russian leader Vladimir Putin became more miserable after Kherson. Due to the mobilization decision, the Russian local people had already lost their trust in Putin. Now, with the re-emancipation of Kherson by the Ukrainians, the political power of the Russian leader has begun to be criticized more. While the uprisings in Russia caused a lot of pressure in the Kremlin administration, the events that took place outside of the border also affected this war. Recently, a missile of unknown origin fell in the village of Przewodów on the border between Ukraine and Poland. 2 people lost their lives due to a missile that fell on Przewodów on the Ukrainian border. The Warsaw government decided to meet immediately after this event, and a state of emergency was implemented in the region. President Andrzej Duda announced that Poland has no clear evidence of who fired the missile for the missile attack on the Ukrainian border. Polish Prime Minister Mateusz Morawiecki announced that they have put all units on high alert. In addition, Morawiecki reminded that his country is a NATO member and stated that the option to activate NATO's Article 4 is on the agenda. After this incident in Poland, a shocking development created an event on the world agenda. The Warsaw government has decided to confiscate 33 billion cubic meters of natural gas from the Russian energy company Gazprom. Yes, you heard right. This shocking decision created an event on the world agenda. Poland seized Gazprom's stake in the Yamal European gas pipeline. A trustee was appointed to the administration on the recommendation of the Polish Internal Security Agency. The Yamal European natural gas pipeline, operated by Gazprom, the Polish side, and owned by Europol Gaz, has an annual capacity of 33 billion cubic meters. In a press release, Polish Minister of Technology and Development Waldemar Buda announced that Gazprom shares in Europol Gaz, which operates in the Polish part of the Yamal European gas pipeline, which carries Russian natural gas to Europe, will now be supervised by the Polish government. Stating that they took the decision to confiscate the shares upon the application of the Polish Internal Security Agency, Minister Buda stated that they appointed Radosław Kwasnicki as a trustee to this company. Minister Buda said a change in management was necessary for the smooth functioning of the company, including ensuring the security of the critical infrastructure of the Europol gas for gas transmission, avoiding possible disruptions in the decision-making process in the company. The minister, who argued that Gazprom's decision to seize its stake in the Europol Gaz serves to improve Poland's economic and energy security at a time when Russia is faced with aggression in Ukraine and President Vladimir Putin's activities aimed at destabilizing the situation in Europe, Duda also stated, "We are doing everything we can to counter the effects of Russian aggression, to eliminate Russian capital, Russian influence. The Constitution does not allow us to expropriate. Therefore, we have appointed a temporary administration together with the Ministry of Internal Affairs and Administration." 48% of the shares of Europol Gaz, the owner of Yamal Europe pipeline in Poland, which carries Russian natural gas to Europe, belongs to the Russian energy company Gazprom. 48% of the Polish state-owned enterprise PGNiG, and 4% is also Polish. Owned by the oil company PKN Orlen. After Russia launched a war against Ukraine, the Polish government placed Gazprom on the list of companies to be sanctioned. Following the said decision, Russia also took a decision on sanctions against Europol Gaz and announced in May that the Polish part of the Yamal Europe pipeline would no longer be used. While these sanctions decisions caused the economic collapse of Russia, it is inevitable that the activities planned by the Moscow administration in Ukraine will be interrupted. The United Nations has decided to take action regarding the human rights violations and war crimes committed by the Russians in Ukraine. It is reported that the United Nations delegation will go to Ukraine for a second time by the end of the year to investigate human rights violations. UN Deputy Secretary General for Political Affairs Rosemary DiCarlo, in her speech at the UN Security Council session, announced that the Ukrainians have been exposed to the most intense bombardments of this war that lasted for more than 9 months in recent times, pointing out that if the attacks continue, the situation in the region may worsen in winter conditions. DiCarlo said, Russian missiles and unmanned aerial vehicles rained bombs on Kiev, Mykolaiv, Chernihiv, Cherkasy, Zhytomyr, Sumy, Kharkiv, Lviv, Poltava, and other places. While destroying and damaging the houses, it's also seriously disrupted the services in the region. Deputy Secretary General Rosemary DiCarlo pointed out that the ongoing bombardment in Ukraine has damaged about 40% of the country's electricity generation capacity, and that most of Kiev has been without electricity for 12 hours a day, emphasizing that these attacks targeting civilians and civilian infrastructure are prohibited under international law. DiCarlo said, the Independent International Commission of Investigation of Ukraine continues its work on accountability for these alleged violations, with ongoing investigations inside and outside Ukraine. The commissioners will arrive in Ukraine before the end of the year. He's planning another visit. In addition, DiCarlo reported that the UN High Commissioner for Human Rights continues to document human rights violations, including 57 cases of sexual violence identified in Ukraine. The UN Secretary General stated that 48 of these 57 cases of sexual violence can be considered as related to the Russian armed forces and related groups. According to the UN, in the Russia-Ukraine war, more than 6,500 civilians have lost their lives, and more than 10,000 have been injured so far. Russia, on the other hand, started to make moves to ease the economy after all these sanctions decisions. Russian oil pipeline operator Transneft reported that Russian oil shipments to Hungary via Ukraine have resumed. The resumption of shipments on the Druzhba line, which carries oil through Ukraine in the direction of Hungary, alleviated supply concerns and affected the decline in prices. The decrease in the commercial crude oil stocks of the USA created the perception of high demand and limited the downward movement of prices. The U.S. Energy Information Administration announced that commercial crude oil stocks in the country decreased by approximately 5,400,000 barrels last week to 435,400,000 barrels. The market expectation was that inventories would increase by about 400,000 barrels. Despite the decrease in the crude oil stocks of the USA, the world's largest oil producer and consumer, the increase in gasoline stocks causes concerns about a decrease in demand and pressures prices downwards. While this policy of the Russians eases the energy markets around the world, the Moscow administration is thought to have interests in this regard. One of the things Russia needs most right now is seen as an economic resource. The reason for this is that Russia must be able to make military progress in order not to be left behind in the Ukraine war, which pushes the Moscow administration to make concessions in certain areas. For this reason, the Russians need economic resources more than ever before. It's a matter of curiosity in what other areas the Russians will make concessions against the unstoppable advance of the Ukrainian heroes. We will see this together in the future. Please do not forget to subscribe to our channel and turn on notifications in order to be informed about new videos. Thank you for watching us.